Hello, we are live. My name's Garland Nixon, and I'm here with my friend and a brilliant author, poet, and American activist, the one and only Tara Reade. Hi, Tara. Welcome to my YouTube show.
Hi, thank you for having me. That's great.
Tara, she authored a book called Left Out When the Truth Doesn't Fit In, and she's a host of a podcast called The Politics of Survival. She's got a great article out right now in RT. We're going to discuss that. We're going to have some fun and have a great discussion with Tara. I'm really looking forward to it. While
Yep.
we get some people on, we're going to do a quick countdown and we're going to rock and roll. So Tara, let's get right into it. And let me just say this. We'll start off. We're going to talk about. She's got a great article in RT called "America's Demonization Project Against Me is Complete. I've been vilified, hounded, and denounced for nearly 3 years since making my sexual assault accusation against Joe Biden. But will I shut up? Hell no. That's the Tara Reade that we know and love. Hey, Tara, welcome to my YouTube show, and thanks a lot for coming on.
Oh, hey, it's great to be here. And I tweet you so often. And I retweet you, so I'm a huge fan of what you say. And you have this way, a really good sense of humor around some really serious stuff, which we need right now because things are, it's kind of dark, isn't
Things are
it?
a little rough around the edges. Well, this is the way I just, of course, this is about you, but I'll just say this about me. I study and try to practice the philosophy of Zen, and I just break it down all down to like this. Life is any way you see it. It can be a tragedy. It can be a comedy. It's just a big movie. I view it as a comedy. And so I just laugh and just everything. I look at it like a big movie that's a comedy. And in the end, everybody comes out and holds hands and bows and says,
Right.
thanks a lot. The heroes and the villains, they're all in a big comedy. So that's the way I look at it. So it allows me to have fun, to have the old gallows humor in face of serious issues. But enough about me. Let's get back to Tara Reade. Tara,
I go by
we're
Tara.
laughing and joking.
People say Tara, but it's Tara.
It's hard. And you know why it's hard? Because I had a good friend growing up named Tara. So the
Oh,
brain priming here. So,
well, it's the American way of saying it. So yeah, people say Tara instead of Tara, but it's not Irish. It's Tara.
well, from now on, I will make a strong effort to say Tara at all times. So Tara, let's start here. There may be some people who've been living under a rock for the past 4 years and don't know a little don't know about who you are and your story. So if you could give us, just the background story so we can get started.
Sure. I came forward. I was a former Senate aide for Joe Biden, who's now president of the United States. And I had come forward in 2019 with other 7 women and discussed the sexual harassment and then decided to go ahead and go forward with the full history with him about the sexual assault. And that process was quite harrowing, as you know, because it was when I first came forward about all of it, I was seeking help from Time's Up, and Time's Up was very corrupted, and I didn't know that. I mean, 3 of the top people that founded it were on Joe Biden's payroll already, and I had no idea, and they didn't tell me. And Ryan Grimm broke that story out of The Intercept. So that was kind of groundbreaking. And then I came forward about everything on Katie Halper's show, and then investigative reporter Rich McHugh, who used to work with Ronan Farrow, and did several articles, deep dives into my case. And he's a very, very thorough, good, trauma-informed reporter. I have a huge respect for him. And and so that was part of me coming forward in the Megyn Kelly interview, which was an adventure unto itself. And she was amazing. And I admire her so much. And that was really cool. The rest of it was hard. New York Times, Washington Post, AP, CNN, PBS. PBS, did a hit piece on me. didn't let me tell my story, wouldn't quit my interview. And even a couple years later, when I contacted them and said, you just kind of did this long thing about how you talked to 74 staff members with Joe Biden. You didn't talk to me, and you won't let me speak. And they won't. They won't.
If I may ask you this,
Yeah.
not to interrupt you, but there's an important question in my mind, and I'm sure other people at some of our viewers. At the time that you came forward, there was the whole Me Too. I'm not going to use the word movement anymore. The whole Me Too activity was going on,
Mhm.
and people were getting canceled left and right. And everybody from John Conyers to Al
Mhm.
Franken and all these other things had happened. Did you have any expectations when you came forward? Did you feel like maybe this is a good time? Maybe I can get some justice. Not to lead the witness on, but what did you expect when you came forward?
Well, you bring up a good point. Two things, really. I expected solidarity with some of the, like the Women's March and the Me Too movement, as you mentioned at the time. I expected, and Tarana Burke she did like one tweet about me, otherwise she's been relatively silent. And no women's groups gathered around me. And I did have individuals like Rose McGowan who stood up, and other
Hmm.
Weinstein survivors. And I've had survivors that are celebrities contact me, but they do it on the down low. They don't want to be public with their support because they're afraid of the backlash, because the Democrats have created this environment where if you, or I should just say the elites, because it's both parties, right? Democrats and Republicans. If you question them in any way, their narrative, their talking points, you are canceled. So going
Hmm.
back to the thing. So I went to Time's Up, which was the legal arm of Me Too. It was funded heavily to protect women who were coming forward about very public cases. And you know what happened. They did not help many of us, actually. And they've since been dismantled. I think there's 2 staffers left, and they're rebuilding. Um, but it was a very difficult thing to not have people around me that cared. And these so-called liberal feminists that would do these op-eds, that were just disgusting. I mean, they would say terrible things about me. One of them said I killed the Me Too movement. And nothing
Well,
about what Joe
i-
Biden did.
in a
But
way, they were right. And here's what I mean. You
okay.
exposed it for what it really was. It was a political operation. It was the term I used to use is "Me Too" unless you're blue. So it was a convenient tool, a blunt object to use to attack your enemies. And when you came forward, the pretense with Me Too was we are concerned about women and we're here for rights and we're concerned about women who have been mistreated, abused, et cetera, et cetera. That
Right.
was the pretense. That was the exoteric or the cover story. The reality was it was a funded political operation to go after people that they wanted to go after, and they'd sacrifice somebody every now and then who wasn't too high on the totem pole. But when you came along, it exposed that the Me Too movement was not a social movement or a social operation. It was a political hit operation.
You're right. It was there to catch and kill for the political elites, right? And that's what Times Up became, and got exposed for. The Cuomo, different things that they did. But you're right, and it was really disheartening. Also, just seeing some of the horrible things, like you saw the woman who said Joe Biden could rape me on Fifth Avenue and I'd still vote for him. I mean, that's when Rose McGowan was being very public about saying this is a cult. This isn't even a Democrat. The Democratic Party is a cult, and so this is ridiculous. And yeah, so and then what happened was Joe Biden spent a great deal of his resources to keep his reputation clean, and he weaponized social media trolls either through indirectly, right, or the Democratic National Committee. And then we're going to have a new wave of that coming with the
Mhm.
midterms. Watch, it's already started. I already have gotten shots over the bow. Like they do the same grind. It's she's a liar, she's a liar, she's a liar. It's just the same repetitive bullshit because they got nothing. You know, they tried to slam me with everything from being a Russian agent to every other bad word in the book. So
When I read your recent op-ed, one thing that stood out to me is that there were people who were making threats that implied that there was a danger to your person, so much so that you ran into an instance, and that to this day you're not sure whether or not whether or not that was in fact a serious act, or just happenstance that wasn't connected. But can you tell us about some of the things that happened? I mean, the threats, the things. I mean, nothing that you maybe would feel, uncomfortable with, but what happened to you?
Well, I mean, and it shouldn't happen to any survivors, right? And I think it's happened to the Epstein, it's happened to Weinstein. Rose went through hell. Like when I mean, she's been through all this. Juanita Broderick through all this. The Clinton machine went after Juanita Broderick, like you would not believe. She was threatened and intimidated, and it was frightening for her. So, as I said in the op-ed, I'm standing on the shoulders of some other brave women who came forward before me. I had an incident, and it was when my story wasn't, it was like there, but it wasn't, I wasn't all over the place yet. And that's when I had the incident where somebody, pushed my car and then tried to drive me off the road, and then like turned around and came at me full, at night with the headlights on bright. It was very scary. And I reported it to the authorities, local and federal, and, and dealt with things like that. I had someone try to kidnap my horse. I had to go to the sheriff. I mean, it was just crazy shit. Like, and then I had to have this whole conversation with the sheriff, which I didn't know, about like how hard it is when someone tries to kidnap. Like it was a long thing, but I mean, it was ridiculous. Like here I was in the middle of this press media cycle going after me. At the same time, I'm trying to, protect myself, and I didn't have financial resources for security.
Right.
And they knew I lived alone, and they were just coming after me. It was horrendous. And it was in the middle of lockdown during the pandemic. So that even exasperated everything. So yeah, it was not fun.
One of the things I wonder about is, and that's when, knowing what you know, and knowing that you came out and basically told the truth. You said, this is what happened after all of the crap that we heard about, we got to believe women, et cetera, et cetera. And then everything, it all went in the opposite direction. To see Joe Biden, a guy who, I mean, just flat out, no, are you kidding? Nothing happened. I've never done anything wrong. And this is what I think about when I think about Joe Biden. I think about the persona that's put forth in the media. He's a regular old all shucksy kind of guy from the neighborhood, a guy you can trust, an honest, hardworking, hard hat Amtrak wearing kind of guy. But when I see things such as, I recall, and a lot of people forgot this, there was a story that came out where he was talking to the installed president of Afghanistan. And the guy was basically saying the Taliban's coming across the border. There's tens of thousands of fighters. We're in a world of trouble. Things are going to bloody hell. And Joe Biden said to him, and I'm paraphrasing, I need you to say that everything's fine, even if it isn't true. Even though it's not true, basically, I need you to lie for me. And this was an instance where this guy's hide, I mean, let's face it, he could end up with his head chopped off. And Joe Biden's telling him, yeah, just lie, just say everything's all right. And I thought to myself, this all shucksy guy
Mhm.
that they put across, this regular old guy from around the neighborhood, is a high level political elitist operative who wouldn't tell the truth if you waterboarded him. And then I think about your story. How do you feel looking at Joe Biden and the persona that he's put forward versus what you experienced with Joe Biden?
Well, yeah, exactly. And all the things that you just outlined are exactly true. You've seen him lose his temper with reporters. You've seen him lose his temper with constituents. When I worked for him, he does this thing. He did it with me when he was angry. That time that it happened, he smiles when he's angry. It's very disconcerting because you know how people look for facial, right? Like as you're dealing with things, he has a very disconcerting habit of when he's very angry, he smiles, and it's a very menacing thing. And I remember it's so interesting because I use the phrase wolf in sheep's clothing, but actually, when I was a young staffer, I had very mixed feelings with him. I respected him, but after I got to know him a bit, I started to I just could sense something was really off.
Mm-hmm.
Like a wolf. I remember that used to come in my mind, but it was the way he smiled. Wolf. That was the word. And not a good person. Like it's hard to, But then he did good things like the Violence Against Women Act. Those were mostly his staff pushing it. He didn't even want, I found out later, the Violence Against Women Act. He was tagging it onto the crime bill. And so there was that. But at the time, and through many years, even, I stayed pretty much a Democrat all the way, through until almost 2018, 2017, right around there. Around the time he was vice president, it was excruciating for me. I told a few friends, I didn't come forward to the media. And it's been on the record who friends, friends that knew that I told about the assault or whatever. And I didn't, but my daughter was in school and I was not going to be public.
Right.
But I knew about his dishonesty. It's something that came up during his, when he was trying to get elected president, it came up when he plagiarized. It claimed up when he lied. He would make campaign promises and not keep them as a senator in Delaware. There were people in Delaware that couldn't stand him, but he was in there. Part of that was DuPont. Basically, like if you could put like tags underneath all the senators and the members of Congress, DuPont, Bristol Myers Squibb, excuse me. Those were, some big pharma, and some of the big credit card companies were all around Biden. And, it's like a mafia kind of, and Nancy Pelosi is Dianne Feinstein. I mean, they don't belong in Congress anymore. They need to leave. Like, regardless of, I'm not trying to be ageist, but my goodness, they're fossilizing in their seats. They're not, Dianne Feinstein's not even coherent.
Right.
And they're just raking in millions. And Obama became he was the first president to become a multimillionaire by becoming president. What happened to our system? Like, something's really broken, where you become a multimillionaire when you become president. No, this is a public service job. That's not the goal of that. If you want that, you go into the tech industry or entrepreneuring. But I don't know. It corrupts.
Well, when I think about Joe Biden, it's interesting because when you say he smiles when he gets angry, I love to read a lot and I study a lot of psychology and, the psychopath next door. I've read a lot about the psychopaths, sociopaths, etc. And I've said often that the leaders of our country, when you look at how they have no empathy for people in other countries, they just drone and murder and slaughter people by the millions, by the thousands. They, starve people, etc. And they have no care for providing even basic services for people here in America, that they're a bunch of sociopaths. Now, when you said he smiles when when he gets angry, I have read about sociopaths, and they talk about when they see that, one of the things they'll do is they'll show people videos of bad things, people being hurt or terrible things happening to people or animals or whatever, right? And they will notice that sociopaths at time will watch these and they will literally smile. And when you said he smiles when he gets angry, I thought that's sadism. He's in a position of power. And when he gets angry, he has the option, because of that power, of punishing someone, of making someone hurt, making someone unhappy. And it's almost like he smiles because, okay, he, as a sadist, here's an opportunity that I get to throw my weight around, that I get to punish and mistreat someone. I mean, do you think I'm off base based on your experience?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Because one of the shocking things about the sexual assault for me was that I had this cognitive dissonance about the whole thing, about him and the whole thing, because he's supposed to be good. He's supposed to be doing good things, and he was doing a bad thing. And I was protesting, and then I became bad for not complying, right? And what was confusing to me at the time was just that he's a person in authority. He was my boss. He was over me. But I just thought, the way I said no, it's not like I made a big thing about it at the time. I made it very clear, and I was very upset, but I didn't scream, right? I didn't, there was not that kind of drama in that moment. And yet his rage came through, and it's like he liked seeing me afraid. He liked it. And that was, I never forgot that. I never forgot the look in his eye. And it's like he wasn't him anymore. It wasn't, there was no one home. That's the only way to describe it. There was no one home. And I guess I look back on that, and then, you start thinking it's your fault. Because the first thing I thought of when he said, "Come on, man, I thought you liked me," the first thing I thought of was what I did wrong. Like, what did I do wrong? How did I bring this onto myself? Of course, that's what, now knowing human behavior and knowing more of what I know, he set me up for, like, oh, this is your fault. I didn't do
Right.
this. I didn't cause this. Like, you're mad, whatever. Because he'd done it before. I'm positive. There's no question. And the way he just casually walked away too, like there was no, he didn't seem afraid of me telling anyone. He didn't seem nervous about it. Nothing. Like there was nothing like that.
No,
So
no
yeah,
remorse, no thoughts of what could happen to him. And I'm not saying that he's a sociopath. I'm not implying that he's a sociopath or anything like that. I'm saying, but that is sociopathic behavior. Not
well, I
having any concern for the results of your actions is classic sociopathic behavior.
think he just knows he has people around him to protect him. Like he
Hmm.
had money and power. And I remember he was the chairman of judiciary. He and they pretty much went about destroying my life pretty much 3 times. My career was over. I couldn't get another job on the Hill. That was his way of eliminating the problem.
Hmm.
um then the second time, of course, was when I came forward in 2019. He had Edward Isaac Dovere, who had worked, I don't know how closely he works with the campaign, and I think there's something there because he somehow communicates, because my story was not even in the press yet. It was like it had not been released, and he was online calling me a Russian agent before it even hit the press. Isn't that
Wow.
bizarre? Like, how did he know? Like, I'm this person who's not in that's always troubled me. And the night that he started that was the first time I got a death threat, being a traitor or whatever, um, being called that. And, so I think that the people around Biden obviously know he has a problem. They keep him away, they try to manage him, so to
Hmm.
speak.
Hmm.
I think he's a little unmanageable. And I personally know a lot of stories. There's a lot of rumors and stories, and I don't get into those because
Right.
I can only deal with what I experienced and the factual things that went on, and that's it. And so I kind of close that universe and let other people discuss what they need to. But I do
Yeah.
know that there's 2 women that haven't come forward that want to, or not want to. They're afraid to, but I'm sure they would have. And if they could, if somehow the process was made safe and their family supported it, they would. But after watching what happened to me and my family, I don't know. I think it's had a chilling effect on survivors coming forward.
Intentionally. And the other thing is this, I always assume, particularly since I do, a lot of uh, um, media all over the place, any platform I can get on, I always assume that all of my communication methods are compromised. And the fact of the matter is that Joe Biden was a very powerful man, and you were in the crosshairs probably of, those who have the ability to, to monitor your communications. And I would suspect that the likelihood was, yeah, they knew because, a lot of your communications were hacked or otherwise compromised.
Well, and before I went public, I had contacted politicians with the problem, not spelling it out exactly, but like I had contacted certain people, and before I went to media. And it was before, and it was during the time, like actually, and I was going to bring that up before, when I was coming forward, finally, he was going to be dropping out of the race. I
Hmm.
mean, everyone was saying, remember, it was like near Virginia. It was a Virginia or Carolina. Yeah. And he was going to drop out. I later found out that that actually was a lie. He never had any intention of dropping out, just so you know. I mean, that isn't that bizarre? Like the games that are played. But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
campaign operative. So I understand. I think the mistake they made with me is that I had the training. So,
Hmm.
you're not going to pull anything that I haven't been exposed to. So go ahead, bring it. Like, and so the social medias did. They brought it. They tried to put me in jail. You mentioned them taking my communications. I don't know if you know this, but under sealed warrants, the Justice Department took my Twitter, all my informations. So I found out from a Twitter lawyer, contacted me, and sent me the sealed warrant. Said they had to go to court to show me. But under the sealed warrant, they had opened a case in Northern California and then paneled a grand jury. And I don't know what it's about to this day. So that was a year
Wow.
ago. Yeah, and they took
So,
everything. So all
right.
my communications, yeah.
Well, it was probably something to do with, calling you some kind of a Russian agent or something. I mean, that's the thing they do now. And the fact of the matter is, to me, certainly I understand that the possibility is there that any of us could face, legal jeopardy looking at what happened to Julian Assange.
Yeah.
But, I feel like I'm in the crosshair. And you know what? To me, this may sound a little weird. I don't know who said it, but I've heard this said, if you're in an unjust society and you're not being, viewed by the unjust authorities in a, through a jaundiced eye, and I'm paraphrasing a lot, then you must not be doing something right. So were they coming after you? To me, that is the most damning proof that they know your story is correct, because if your story was untrue and they suspected that it was untrue, they would probably laugh at you, they would probably ignore you, but the fact that they were going after you, that they were digging, means they know this thing's true, they know it's a problem. And here's what I think: how do they know it's true? Because they know who Joe Biden is, because you're not the first person who's come forward. People have probably been paid off, threatened, and God only knows what else. But I never met Joe Biden, but I see him sniffing all over a 12-year-old girl,
Yeah.
touching people inappropriately. It is not a far stretch for me to believe that old Uncle Sniffy here is doing things with women whenever he sees an opportunity that nobody's around that would be inappropriate, and in this instance, and probably many more, downright illegal.
Well, and the thing is, um, and I shared this in my first op-ed. I'm an affectionate person, but I'm aware of people's space, and I certainly am not like that to children I don't know. It's not appropriate. Because it teaches children to not have boundaries when you do that.
Mhm.
I've always known that. So I think it's curious that he just has no boundaries with children. That's odd. But putting that aside, because they've kind of called that a Republican conspiracy. I don't know any facts around it. I don't want to propagate things that aren't true, but I do note that he does not respect people's spaces. He didn't before the pandemic anyway. And when he like when I was around him during the sexual harassment part, when he talked about like wanting me to serve drinks in a short skirt and all that stuff, um, he would just put his hands on me, like I don't know, it was bizarre. Like at the time, because the men were we were like property. That's the only way I can
Mhm.
it's like he came into the room behind me and he would just put his hands on my shoulder, go underneath my hair, rub my neck. And this wasn't a man I was intimate with. So it was really strange to me. I wasn't used to that. And I come from an affectionate family, but you don't do that just to people that I don't know.
So
My-
you were around him on a regular basis, working, I assume, on his staff, in one
yeah.
one way or another. Um, the Joe Biden that we see on TV, that's what I'm interested in. What was he like? What was he like as a person? Was he? I mean, look, we'll be honest. If he was like, well, overall, he was a nice guy, but every now and then he did this or that or whatever. But what did you see about Joe Biden? What about his personality stood out about you at the and not in hindsight, but even at the time? Well, in hindsight too, but even at the time, what'd you think about him and the way he treated people and acted and all of that stuff?
It surprised me he was racist, which he was. And there's no question. Like I saw that. In fact, I got into an argument with the chief of staff about lack of diversity in our office. So I had like meetings about it. Um, he was a bigot about Russia at the time, and I've written about this. I heard him make disparaging remarks. He's like a frat boy. He's not intellectual. He's what you call a lightweight. Like it shocks me he became president, because back in the day when he was running in those times, he was considered a lightweight because he okay, for instance, like some of the legislative staff would be down, and what they do is they'll be all well versed on a bill, right? And be kind of involved with the details of whatever thing he's going to be voting on. And they will give him a rundown and then say, vote this way, that way, whatever. And if he went to lunch with Strom Thurmond, which he did, he would vote with him unless a staff person stopped him. He just was not, he wouldn't, he wasn't that thoughtful. And he was a very, they would make jokes that one of the people worked for him for like 3 years and he didn't know his name. You would have to like wave him down and he still wouldn't recognize him. Um, and those things. In contrast, I had been an intern for Congressman Leon Panetta, and Leon Panetta went on to become the director of CIA and so on, all his background. But Leon was a very serious person. There was none of that. And I remember meetings with him. I remember one time him calling me into his office about something because, and I'm being so nervous, because, and it was a silly thing, but I used to give, as an intern, you gave constituents tours, and he just wanted to know that a couple of constituents were just raving about their tour. And what it was I would get lost a lot because I don't have a good sense of direction. And then so I would take them down to the basement and get them on the subway, the subway that's down in the basement, because back then the rules were lighter. I remember his bellowing laugh. He laughed so hard at that. And he was just different. He was more like, he would be studying the legislation. He'd be reading it. He'd be having arguments with staff about it. Like there was something, a project I was working on as an intern that he was, so I had that experience, a very serious individual who's very like his politics or not, he was into what he was doing. And then you had Biden, and Biden was into, partying and having some fun, but I mean, not drinking, partying, but I don't know, just not serious.
You know what it sounds like to me? That, and we've experienced this, that is when you saw some of the members of Congress, you consider them an intellectual. You consider them a person who had a genuine curiosity, an intellectual curiosity. If they wanted to know what they were dealing with, they wanted to know the legislation, et cetera. And then you had, and this is what, interestingly enough, what Biden reminds me of. He reminds me of W. Bush. A person who's there, who wants to have some fun, who likes the ceremonial position of being in power, but who wants to goof off all the time. And when it's time to really make decisions, he only has a superficial understanding of the issues, and he has to rely on the people around him, and the people around him are corrupt as hell. And so you end up with, I mean, look at the state of the Democratic Party right now under Joe Biden. I've never seen it worse.
No, but I mean, that's not all him. That's partly the DNC. I mean, they are maniacally just tearing it down, I swear, themselves. I think their biggest mistake is going against 40% of their base, right? You got 40% of the base that's progressive, whether they want to admit it or not. What they did to Bernie Sanders, not once, but twice. The way they've tried to undermine the Green Party to the point where they've taken them off the ballots in certain states, in my eyes, illegally. I mean, I think their time has come. I think between Cuomo, Biden, just some of the corruption, their time has come. But back to the time when I was there, you had to understand the atmosphere was very I remember one time bringing up boxes of liquor, even though Joe Biden didn't drink. Other members of Congress did. They'd have women in, they'd sit them on their laps. It was a very different atmosphere than I suppose it is now, maybe. I don't know, but it was, so that's why at the time, what happened to me was bad and it was awful, but it wasn't, we didn't have the same conversations about those sorts of things that we do now. And, Anita Hill, it was on the heels of Anita Hill, and you saw the way she was destroyed.
Yep.
And it was right before Monica Lewinsky. Or it was going on as Monica Lewinsky. So you saw this kind of atmosphere that, that a lot of the men on the Hill looked at women as objects, and sometimes objects of pleasure for them to use and then discard at their will.
Well, I've been around the Hill, and I've done some work on the Hill for a couple of different, media work for a couple of different House members. And, you see it. You see this, senator walk up, and he has all these young, beautiful, the most beautiful women in the world, and he's surrounded by all of them. And it's oftentimes they're scantily clad. And I look at it and I just think to myself, there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. They should be there. But you see this dynamic over and over, and you see the interactions, and you think, interesting. You know what I mean? Interesting.
Yeah.
And you get the feeling of what's going on the Hill with this power. My office is on K Street, and the same type of thing. You see these powerful, very wealthy people on K Street that are, PR people or lawyer or international criminals of some manner, and they've got all the young pretty girls there, and what's going on. You see what's going on. And so what your story doesn't surprise me. And I'm sure that there are a lot of young women who get a job and it's like, oh, great, I get to work on this PR firm on K Street or on Capitol Hill or whatever. And they see it as a great opportunity. And they're like, okay, I've gone to school, I've gotten the education, I've prepared for this, and I put in for this. And they get the job working for Senator so-and-so or for a PR firm, whatever it is, or lobbying firm X. But the guys who are running the firm are looking at them, rubbing their hands together saying, okay, well, this is my opportunity to give this thing, to give this a shot here and see how that works out. And because I've heard stories about women who've coming into some of these firms or on the Hill, they're there for a couple of months and they're like, oh, I didn't know this was, you know what I mean? This is what it was all about. And sometimes some pretty bad stories. So I know where you're coming from, and I've seen some of that kinds of stuff. I haven't seen the fire, but trust me, I've seen the smoke.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it's just, I don't know if it's changed or gotten any better. I mean, what's sad is, but from the Cuomo case, I can see it didn't. And just, like you saw some of the messages that got published in the criminal report where they were saying, use the Tara Reade, the Tara Reade accusation with Joe Biden. We can victim shame on the record now. Like, I mean, that's stunning. These are upper level staff plotting to go after Lindsey Boylan and Charlotte Bennett. It's disgusting on so many levels. And yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
That's fine. This is my phone.
Did you ever get an opportunity to go on either, I would, right off the bat, I would think Fox would say, hey, come on, I was on Fox for many, many years. But did you get on the opportunity to go on Fox, CNN, MSNBC, any of the major interviews? And if so, how did that go?
Well, if you remember, they all came at me and there was the death threat that I got because I was going to go on with Chris Wallace. And then he was very lovely because I had to cancel. It was right. I had not had any sleep and I had a death threat. It was very serious. I had to come around that. And then in between that time, I decided to go with Megyn Kelly. And the reason I went with Megyn Kelly is she wasn't affiliated with any network. And in fact, she got Rich to produce on YouTube, as you know. And it was really, I knew she would be tough on me. And I think it was good because she was a woman, but yet she could be really tough on me. And I could really tell my story with dignity. And that's what she did. So she asked me, and I put this in my book, if there's anything off limits, because they do that. They ask you like what, boundaries, and they might even still nudge, even with that. But I told her, ask me anything you want. So she went after some of the issues at the time. And believe it or not, the rape myths then were, of course, what I was wearing, which is really stupid. Right. And then, of course, about Vladimir Putin, which was people in like every interview, even now, people are so fascinated with him. And it's so interesting. I just wish he would come on Western media somehow. But of course, I understand why he wouldn't want to. But Oliver Stone did some great interviews with him. Yeah. But I think Americans are just so fascinated with him because we're told so many lies, right? So anyway, so she asked me about being a Russian agent, about Vladimir Putin, and I'm not an expert in Russia. And I'm not a Russian agent. So it was just this level of like, it was laughable. It just like made me laugh at one point. Then I was really serious about it, and it was, anxiety provoking. Now it just makes me laugh. Because now everyone's a Russian agent. You're a Russian agent. You're a Russian agent. It's like whatever. It's like lost its meaning. You have to come up with a new one. Like, I guess it'll be Chinese agent now. So
does it seem like it's almost become like an insult? Like it's not even literal. Oftentimes, like it's not, you're a Russian agent, meaning you're literally an operative working for Russia. It's you're a Russian agent. I'll put it like this. I've seen instances where conservatives just say that person's a communist. And what it really means is I don't like them. they're a jerk and I don't agree with them. And it's like you're a Russian agent or a Russian bot or whatever to and I'm an independent. I refer to the two parties as cults, the brainwashed cults, the blue brainwashed cult and the red brainwashed cult. But in the blue brainwashed cult, you're a Russian agent means I don't like you. I don't like your politics for whatever reason. And in my crowd, in my group, in my tribe, cult as it were, the worst possible name I can call you is a Russian agent, a Putin puppet. So that's their way of like signaling to the other people in their crowd, I really hate this person and you all should too, because this person is a drum roll Russian agent.
So what I do when I get that online, if you've seen some of my replies, is I send them this picture that I have of someone who did fingernails of the Kremlin. Like, it's just really funny. And I just put that up and I'm like, here you go. Look at the middle finger. And I mean, because I just don't give a shit anymore. Like I'm at a point where, you know, you want to call me that? Really? You want to push me in that direction? Okay, let's go. You know? I just think it's silly. And like I said, the dossier. Oh, this is interesting. This is really interesting. They were posting things I wrote in 2019 because I was writing a novel, I was doing research, and I wrote some creative writing blogs, but those included my opinions as well about, but they were actually going to be part of this novel that I was writing. Anyway, long story short, I was in a writing group. The only people apparently that read these Medium posts were the NSA because
of course.
You know, like nobody else read them. But like
they were literally reading them while you were typing them because they probably had a keystroke program in your computer.
Like my only audience for my writing and poetry is the NSA, like 200, 300 people. But anyway, I looked at one of the posts and I was like, holy shit, I wrote about Putin stopping a world war, like before. Like because of all the tension we're causing. And I feel I might post it because I'm like, here we are. Like he's doing it again. He's trying to stop. It's like, you know, this aggression by the US, and they keep calling it Russian aggression. It's the US and NATO and the Britain, you know, England aggressing Russia, you know, and NATO. And they keep saying Russia surrounding Ukraine's border. But then if you flip the map, you look at it, it's NATO surrounding Russia. I mean, come on. It's just silliness. So anyway, they used those to indict me as like a spokesperson, you know, or like, you know, whatever. And I go hard back and I go, that's right, because it's true, because you're listening to propaganda. And the truth is, you know, Vladimir Putin is just a dude. He's a guy in charge of a very big country, but who knows what he's like? We only get a lens through propaganda. We don't know anything about him, anything. And frankly, I'm sure he's scared to let anyone know anything about him because of how aggressive Western disinformation is. And what I would say is that it wouldn't matter if it was him or someone else. It's just whoever's the president of Russia, that's who they're going to just villainize and make the representative of they're like the super villain. And it's like they think Americans are very simple, and maybe Americans are. Just, you know, it's just good or bad. There's no in between. It's just, you know, so you have to have a villain and a good guy. America good, Russia bad. And then that justifies spending almost $1 trillion on weapons.
Well, you know, and I don't limit it to, you know, I talk about this on radio at time, and I don't limit to Putin. You know, I say you will notice when the U.S. puts the crosshairs on a country, it's generally a country that is independent, that doesn't want to be a vassal state to the U.S. empire. And here's the game: the name of you don't mention the country anymore. You only mention the name of the person who's in charge of the country, and that person becomes an authoritarian dictator who is doing something to his own people. Assad, oh, he's evil. The mullahs or whoever they are that run Iran, they're evil. The Saddam Hussein, he was evil. So the leader of a country is, the countries don't even exist. There's only the leader of the country. You demonize the leader of a country. You teach the American people that the leader of this country is evil and a villain. And that takes away from the reality that usually we're putting sanctions against millions of people, starving people. People are dying because they can't get the most basic medicine to treat common illnesses, et cetera. And we're doing all of these terrible things. And what we tell, the cover story that we tell the American people is there's a leader named fill in the blank, Assad, Putin, Xi, whatever. That person's evil. Therefore, whatever we do to that person, forget that there's like 100 million other people there that are actually the ones suffering.
Mm.
That's fine, and it's the same thing with Putin. It's the same game, and the fact that you're wise enough to see through that game means you have to be villainized as a fill in the blank. Remember Tulsi Gabbard when she
Yeah.
said we should have peace with Syria, and they're like, "Oh, you're an Assad apologist, an Assad toady, whatever the case may be." That's the game. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I said they're due to Katie Halper and Matt Taibbi. They're Assadists, you know. The trolls call them that. The other word they use, which is really stupid, is grifter, and I'm so sick of hearing that word. They call everyone a grifter. Like, what? I don't even know what it means anymore. It's just annoying. But I think going back to what you said, it reminded me of Hillary Clinton and talk about sociopathy. Whew, that her reaction, that videotape of her reacting to Gaddafi being brutalized. I mean, I don't care, like, okay, Gaddafi, whatever you think of him, but to see a man, I mean, he was beaten and you know, I don't even want to go into what happened to him, but it was horrifying.
Brutally murdered.
Brutally murdered and raped there on screen, and she laughed. And there's a video of her laughing and enjoying it. And you know, everyone's seen it, because that turned a lot of people's minds. They were like, wait, that's creepy. It was creepy. And then she was watching some other mission that we did where we killed someone, and there's just a gleam in her eye. She's just not, there's something wrong with our leaders. They're just, it's deplorable. And my mom actually met Gaddafi, by the way, when she was young, long before I was born. She was with some diplomats in Malta, and then had traveled to Libya, I think. And I don't know all the circumstances, but she was at a diplomatic function party. And he was very young, and it was before his rise to power. And she met Gaddafi. And I remember she was telling me how handsome and charismatic he was. And she talked to him for like an hour. And they had a translator there, but he spoke some English, apparently. I don't know, like all the details. But I think that's interesting. And she never knew what happened to him. And I'm glad she didn't know, because she, you know, she was a very interesting woman, my mom. She was a anti-war activist, and she was part of Committee Against Racism in Chicago. She did marches, helped organize marches in Chicago against the Chicago police brutality and things like that.
So when you well, and just you know, I have found that without fail, when you know the world leaders that are demonized by the U.S. as evil villains, without fail, when you because human beings are complicated, that
Mhm.
when you research these people, they're just another leader of a country, and they've done good things and they've done bad things. And if you're
Yeah.
going to lead a powerful person, led a country, you've got to make some decisions, and some of them are going to be right or wrong or good or bad. And God knows if we look at, you know, the decisions that our leaders have made, all of them should probably be in a dungeon somewhere underneath underneath the Hague. At any rate, there are people who have been around Joe Biden for many years, Tony Blinken and the Sullivans. When you were working there, did you meet any of the same names that you see, you know, in Washington, D.C. today, or maybe in some of the other you know, administration since then when you were working for the Biden team?
I did meet some people, and I know who they are. And it's interesting. Some of the people have gotten their rewards for doing what they're supposed to do and saying what they're supposed to say publicly. So watching that process and who sold out, that kind of thing is pretty interesting. What I would say is that, like you said, there's good people and there's bad people. They do, and people are trying to make a living. They're trying to feed their family, and sometimes they make decisions that, you know, I don't know. Like, I don't know what Blinken's thinking. He's just turned into just complete hawk, in my opinion. And you have it. This kind of came back from the Obama administration. It threaded through that with Hillary Clinton is kind of in that thread. There's some sort of vendetta with, you know, with Russia and with Vladimir Putin specifically. Like, she has a vendetta about him, and
If
so does Biden.
if I could, I predicted this a while back because I've studied Russia for many years, and I've studied the Democratic Party, and there was a guy named Scoop Jackson, Henry
Mhm.
Scoop Jackson. In fact, there's a an institute in London that's named after him, and he was a notorious. They called them the Cold War Democrats. He was a notorious Democrat who was a Russia hawk during the Cold War. He was, there was an element in the Democratic Party that said, basically, we hate the Russians more so than the conservatives, more so than the John Birch Society. We hate them more than anything. And as an example, two of the people that came out of Scoop Jackson's office, two of his assistants were Richard Pearl and Paul Wolfowitz. I mean, the worst of the worst neocons. So when Hillary was running in 2016, I said, if Hillary gets in, she's a absolutely despises Russia. The
Yeah.
Scoop Jackson wing of the Democratic Party will be back in power. She didn't win, but they went after Trump with all of the Russiagate stuff. And now Biden's in, and now, they are at the doorstep of Russia, threatening the entire world. And, I mean, the story.
Yeah.
The last week, Russia is supposed to invade Ukraine tomorrow.
No,
Russia
tonight.
was holding,
Yeah,
tonight. Yeah, I
morning.
forgot about that.
Didn't
And
happen.
they've,
How are they going to
go
backpedal
ahead.
that?
Sure. I'm listening.
No. I'm asking, how are they going to backpedal that, in your opinion? How are they going to
I
headlines
don't,
tomorrow?
it's
Or
so sociopathic. It's almost like, again, like we were talking about sociopaths who never stop to think about the consequences of their actions. I remember, I'll say this a sociopath story. When I was in law enforcement, there was an instance where two people are in a car. One guy had just cashed his check. He goes in the store. He comes back out. His money, his like $500 is gone. He looks at the other guy. Where's my money? I don't know. So at any rate, the bottom line was law enforcement gets there. They end up searching the guy that's in his sock. There's only two people in the car, and he took it. Why? Because to a sociopath thinks like this: I want that money. I can get it. I'll grab it. And they take it. And they don't stop to think, well, the guy's going to come back. Sociopath doesn't get that far. Do I want it? Is it there? Can I get it right now? That's the way these people think. Oh, I know. We'll say Wednesday that the attack is coming Wednesday. The thought of it isn't going to happen because we're lying, and then people will question us. Sociopaths don't get that far. They're only like, yeah, we can do that right now, and boy, it'll get a lot of press, and people will really think Russia's going to be bad. And then when a sociopath gets to the point that they have to deal with the consequences of their actions, well, they deal with that. What, they just make up a new lie. Who cares? If you're going to lie all the time, it doesn't make any difference, because when you get caught, you're still going to lie. And that's what I think the Biden Blinken team is, a team of crazy sociopaths. They're very dangerous. And I think the world, particularly the Europeans, are starting to look at them and saying, oh my God, we thought Trump was bad.
And I tried to sound that alarm. You heard me trying to sound that alarm, that I said, like, it's not just my, what happened to me, the sexual assault is a symptom of a very deep problem. It's a horrible thing that happened to me, but it's going to get bigger. I had said in 2019, if he is president, we will go after Russia in a war. And I kept saying that. And here we are. And I don't know, because it's the hawks around him. And the whole thing about Trump is, I was never a fan of Trump's. Right. And I never would vote Republican, but he didn't get us into close to a world war. And people need to look at that. He was the only president that gave us relief during the pandemic. Biden sure hasn't. Biden didn't keep his promise. And they threw some tests at us, like 410 or whatever that was, a month ago. I mean, they're just, and then you watch Jen Psaki. She's a piece of work. I mean, yeah.
The arrogance. That's the other thing about from what you tell me about Joe Biden, the hubris, the arrogance of his team, to me, reflects what you've said about him. It's almost like they have a contempt for the press, a contempt for anyone who would have the gall, the temerity to question them, no matter how many times they lie. And that kind of reflects what you tell me how Joe Biden seemed when you worked for him as a senator.
He has this fantasy that he's another Kennedy, and he's not. He's not. And this whole, that's what's scary. And he is never going to be close to who John Kennedy was. I mean, John Kennedy died before I was even born, right? Mm-hmm. Most here, but he obviously, by his presidency, you can tell that Joe Biden's not but he's created like this, someone was calling it, well, actually a couple of scholars have been calling it like close to the Cuban Missile Crisis. No, it's not,
Hmm.
because he's not that smart, and he's not that heroic that he's going to pull us back. He's taking us into war. He's not trying to get us out. There's a huge difference. And so and that really bothers me when I see that comparison, because it's a disconnect. There was amping up of aggression, at that time, but what was happening now is purely manufactured by the British and American governments, because they're failing domestically, and there's midterms coming for America, and there's elections coming for England, and there's things going on there with Brexit. So you have these two countries very interested in lining the defense pockets and the military industrial complex, and NATO's not, they're not going along with it. Like Germany's, like, you can really see Germany kind of going, we need heat this winter, although it's getting close to spring. And then you see France going, no, no, no.
Well, you know what I think is interesting? Here's the thing I think that's interesting. And these, the Biden team, I mean, I'll just be blunt. Blinken and these people are really stupid. I can't think of a better word than that. They're really stupid people. One of the things that's obvious is this: the setup for Ukraine is this. Okay, Ukraine, here's the plan. We're going to keep you going for a while. We're going to give you lots of war. Now, here's the plan. We're going to try to bait Russia into coming in and turning your country to rubble, destroying you, wiping out your army, blowing you to smithereens. Okay.
Yeah.
Then after they do that, we will avenge your death by putting out all of these sanctions. Now, we want you to go along with it over here, Europe, and the sanctions are going to wipe out your economy. So they're asking Ukraine to become martyrs so that
Right.
they can get their way. And they're asking Europe to then become economic martyrs because they're going to put in all these sanctions that would wipe out Europe. And might I ask, if it's a shotgun, it's a sawed-off shotgun, because it's going to blow our toes off too, because it would drive the price of energy through the roof, and then we'd go into a recession. It's
And we already are.
madness. And
It
the
is.
other people who are being asked to sacrifice are waking up. The Ukrainians and the Europeans are going, time out. We don't like our part in this movie.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's interesting, the Ukrainian president isn't necessarily cooperating the way they thought he would. He's not the puppet they thought he was. It's interesting to see the pushback a little bit from him. And I don't know what that's about behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, there's something going on. There's some shuffle going on there with the elites. But what I would say is this, and I'm not like, again, you're probably more versed in all of this than I am, but from, the geopolitical observation that I see, they really are determined to either get a conflict or the tension around it so that they can spend money and get money. And then Joe Biden wants to look like a hero, like he resolved it diplomatically. And so it's kind of put Russia in this catch-22, right? And that's how the American government looks at it. It's a win-win. If they go to war, it'll be limited. They'll have a limited involvement. They'll spend, they'll get some money and some attention away from the domestic problems. Okay. If they don't do anything militarily, it doesn't become like Korea, like a conflict, right? Or Vietnam. Then there's this diplomatic route, and then Biden tries to look like the hero, and Blinken and all that, their crowd. It's bullshit. And it's all a setup for fucking, excuse my language, but for November, for the midterms. And all of this theater is because his whole domestic policy has completely failed. I mean, name one piece of legislation that a progressive Democrat or Democrat has gotten through. I can't think of one. Not one. And they have this House, the Senate, and the White House. And I think it's purposeful, because I don't think they ever had any intention of giving relief to American workers. I don't think the Democrats are really Democrats.
No, well, they're the elite ruling class, and he's speaking for his oligarchical supporters. I do think their Eastern Europe game is falling apart for this reason.
Mhm.
Man, you're asking somebody to become a suicide bomber. That's what you're asking Ukraine to do. I've been reading some things lately where basically there's word coming out of Ukraine that they were like, well, we've been told all of this stuff because we figured we'd get aid, we'd get money, we get support. And soon as things started getting bad, the US was like, okay, we're pulling our troops, everybody out. Time for Ukraine to get blown to
Right.
smithereens. And they're staring down the barrel
Mhm.
of the second most powerful army in the world. They are basically a
Yeah.
bug on the windshield of the Russian army, and the US is trying to get the Russian army to smash them. And I think the Ukrainians have woken up to say, look, we're going to go along with this game up until the time where we get annihilated. So they've pushed the Ukrainians into a corner. And meanwhile, of course, we can see with France and Europe, that NATO is crumbling, it's falling apart because again, they have had a world war on their continent. They don't want another bite of that pie. So in a way, in a paradoxical kind of way, the Biden people have pushed this thing so far that
Mhm.
that NATO is cracking up because the NATO countries are all saying you're not going to start a fire in our house and then go home. And now we see Macron, we see the leader of Hungary, we see the leader of Germany, one by one. Now the leader of Italy, one by one, they're all going to Moscow to meet with Putin to say,
Mhm.
can't we shake hands and work this thing out without any nukes going to fly around? And I think
Yeah,
um,
because Europe would be the battleground. And you're coming on the heels of it. I think President Putin of Russia made this point that they remember Yugoslavia, like their
mhm.
generation remembers Yugoslavia if they don't remember World War II. So Yugoslavia was horrible. I mean, like that the death toll, and that's Eastern Europe, that affected all of Europe. And so there's and of course the US did its thing there. So I think that, you know, as far as how we're going to get out is going to be interesting to see over the next few days because how weaponized the media has been for, these intelligence agencies to plant stories about Russian aggression and war is going to break out and blah, blah, blah. How are they going to backpedal this and still save face? I think they're just going to turn it around and say, "Oh, we intimidated them.
Yeah.
We intimidated Russia to back down." So that'll be the thing. Russia back down because we scared them off. And it's like, and I, it there's just the narrative is so bad. I don't know how you recover it. Um, how we get out of this propagandized state. How do we, as American citizens, move forward from here? Like because people have lost complete faith in the New York Times, Washington Post, all of that because they lie,
Mhm.
and now we know it.
So let me ask you this. Having experience with the Biden team way back then and
Mhm.
looking at them after 1 year, I mean, because after 1 year, I look at the Biden team and it's I mean, it is I wouldn't say a dumpster fire. Well, I'll use the term my dad used to say, a shithouse fire. Is what it is. It is a disaster after 1 year. I can't imagine and it's not because of the circumstances. It's not because COVID or whatever. They are assertively taking actions to demonstrate that they are incompetent on a stellar level.
Yeah.
That by midterms, I mean, to me, a year into the Biden administration, and it is completely crumbling. Based on your work with Biden, after you worked with him on his Senate, and you looked at the guy, if you had if someone said, well, one of these days he's going to be president, is this what you would have predicted, or would you have thought he'd at least do better than this?
No, I would have, first of all, back then, like I said, he was considered a lightweight. He was powerful. But once I got to know him and once I got around people that really talked and heard them with their mics off, so to speak, um, he was considered kind of a gadfly and not a lightweight because he is non-intellectual. So, and he'd already had a failed attempt at running for
Oh, that's
president.
right. Yeah.
So I already knew that. But I frankly know this shocked me. I mean, he was vice president. He kind of didn't he just, you didn't, they put medals on each other and went on with their, you know what I mean? It was like
Yeah.
kind of nondescript. Meanwhile, of course, Obama was droning, killing civilians, but, and thank you for Daniel Hale for sacrificing your freedom for telling us the truth about droning. about what drones were doing. But anyway, yeah. So I did not expect it to be this dismal. I did, however, expect it to be this dismal in 2019 and 2020 because I found out some of the people around him were people I knew that are in the background, like Ted Kaufman, people, names you don't know, right? But I know them, and they are not good people. They are
Yeah,
people that will do anything. They will win at any cost. Let's put it that way. They will line their pockets. They will do what they need to do for their elites, and they cover up crimes. And so, of course, crimes against humanity are like not a big step, right?
certainly not in the U.S.
So
empire.
look at what they're doing to Afghanistan. Look what they're doing. Claire Daly. I don't know if go on my timeline on
Hmm.
Twitter and look at Claire Daly's speech that she gave. She's so amazing. Um, I think every Irish young girl would probably want to be Claire Daly when they grow up. She's just an amazing politician. But anyway, she gave a speech about what they're doing with Afghanistan, stealing the money. Like, and no one's talking about it even in Europe. They're taking the money away from the Afghan people. And, she gave the statistic that more than 1 million children are expected to starve to death. I don't even, how do you, and Blinken's just acting smug. And like Psaki, when
He
she
ain't
just,
acting. Blinken's that guy's insane. But
yeah.
again, I mean, Blinken, Avril Haines. I mean,
Mhm.
when you go right around the crew, oh my gosh, and certainly Kamala Harris fits right in because I think she's a few French fries short of a Happy Meal herself. We got a bunch of crazy people, literally. I
Yeah.
believe this that we have people who are mentally ill running our country right now, and that's a sad state of affairs.
Maybe megalomaniacs, yeah, and that's a good description. Megalomaniacs, they're just really into their own game.
Psychopaths, that
Mhm.
sadistic psychopaths. Oh, but at any rate, well, Tara, I
Yeah,
certainly appreciate it. We've been on for an hour, but it's been a lot of fun, and hopefully we can get back on again sometime and chat again.
yeah, it was nice. It was nice seeing you. And again, I enjoy your outlook on politics, on the geopolitical, you know, uh, playing field. I love what you write, so I'll continue to share it. So,
Thanks. And where can people go to find you, find your stuff, find out what's happening with Tara Reade?
well, for me, go to RT because I do the op-eds and then I have
Mhm.
the podcast. And then, of course, on Twitter, I'm at Reade Alexandra. So you can find me there. So,
Wonderful, wonderful. All right,
nice.
thank you, and thanks everybody for joining us. Make sure you share this on all of your social media platforms. If you're watching it on Twitter or Facebook's feed, please go to my YouTube page and you can subscribe to my channel and make sure you click the little bell. Make sure you click the thumbs up, click the little bell, so that you'll ideally get notifications, as Tara knows. Tara, I keep Tara.
That's okay. That's okay.
That there's all kind of shenanigans going on the social media and mainstream online outlets to censor this kind of stuff. At Garland Nixon on Twitter, Garland.Nixon on Instagram, plain old Garland Nixon on Facebook, and garlandin@gmail.com. Feel free to email me. Peace. Thanks a lot. We are out.